The Life of Christopher Columbus. Chapter I. Early Life of Columbus. His birth and birthplace, his early education, his experience at sea, his marriage and residence in Lisbon, his plans for the discovery of a westward passage to the Indies. Christopher Columbus was born in the Republic of Genoa. The honor of his birthplace has been claimed by many villages in that republic, and the house in which he was born cannot be now pointed out with certainty. But the best authorities agree that the children and the grown people of the world have never been mistaken when they have said, America was discovered in 1492 by Christopher Columbus, a native of Genoa. His name, and that of his family, is always written Colombo in the Italian papers which refer to them. For more than 100 years before his time, in Spain it was always written Colon. In France it is written as Column, while in England it has always kept its Latin form, Columbus. It has frequently been said that he himself assumed this form, because Columba is the Latin word for dove, with a fanciful feeling that, in carrying Christian light to the West, he had taken the mission of the dove. Thus, he had first found land where men thought there was ocean, and he was the messenger of the Holy Spirit to those who sat in darkness. It has also been assumed that he took the name of Christopher, the Christ-bearer, for similar reasons. But there is no doubt that he was baptized Christopher, and that the family name had long been Colombo. The coincidences of name are but two more in a calendar in which poetry delights, and of which history is full. Christopher Columbus was the oldest son of Domenico Colombo and Susanna Fontanarosa. This name means red fountain. He had two brothers, Bartholomew and Diego, whom we shall meet again. Diego is the Spanish way of writing the name which we call James. It seems probable that Christopher was born in the year 1436, though some writers have said that he was older than this, and some that he was younger. The record of his birth and that of his baptism have not been found. His father was not a rich man, but he was able to send Christopher, as a boy, to the University of Pavia, and here he studied grammar, geometry, geography and navigation, astronomy and the Latin language. But this was as a boy studies, for in his 14th year he left the university and entered in hard work on the larger college of the world, if the date given above of his birth is correct. This was in the year 1450, a few years before the Turks took Constantinople, and, in their invasion of Europe, affected the daily life of everyone, young or old, who lived in the Mediterranean countries. From this time, for 15 years, it is hard to trace along the life of Columbus. It was the life of an intelligent young seaman, going wherever there was a voyage for him. He says himself, I passed 23 years on the sea. I have seen all the Levant, all the western coasts, and the north. I have seen England. I have often made the voyage from Lisbon to the Guinea coast. This he wrote in a letter to Ferdinand and Isabella. Again he says, I went to sea from the most tender age and have continued in a sea life to this day. Whoever gives himself up to this art wants to know the secrets of nature here below. It is more than 40 years that I have been thus engaged. Wherever anyone has sailed, there I have sailed. whoever goes into the detail of the history of that century will come upon the names of two relatives of his: El Mozo, the boy, or the younger, and his uncle, Francesco both celebrated sailors. The latter of the two was a captain in the fleets of Louis XI of France, and imaginative students may represent him as meeting Quentin Durward at court. Christopher Columbus seems to have made several voyages under the command of the younger of these relatives. He commanded the Genoese galleys near Cyprus in a war which the Genoese had with the Venetians. Between the years 1461 and 1463 the Genoese were acting as allies with King John of Calabria, and Columbus had a command as captain in their navy at that time. In 1477, he says, in one of his letters, "In the month of February, I sailed more than 100 leagues beyond Tyle." By this he means Thule, or Iceland. Of this island the southern part is 73 degrees from the equator, not 63 degrees, as some geographers pretend. But here he was wrong. The southern part of Iceland is in the latitude of 63.5 degrees. The English, chiefly those of Bristol, carry their merchandise to this island, which is as large as England. When I was there the sea was not frozen, but the tides there are so strong that they rise and fall 26 cubits. The order of his life after his visit to Iceland is better known. He was no longer an adventurous sailor boy, glad of any voyage which offered. He was a man 30 years of age or more. He married in the city of Lisbon and settled himself there. His wife was named Philippa. She was the daughter of an Italian gentleman named Bartolomeo Muniz de Peristrello, who was, like Columbus, a sailor, and was alive to all the new interests which geography then presented to all inquiring minds. This was in the year 1477, and the King of Portugal was pressing the expeditions which, before the end of the century, resulted in the discovery of the route to the Indies by the Cape of Good Hope. The young couple had to live. Neither the bride nor her husband had any fortune, and Columbus occupied himself as a draftsman, illustrating books, making terrestrial globes, which must have been curiously inaccurate, since they had no Cape of Good Hope and no American continent, drawing charts for sale, and collecting, where he could, the material for such study. Such charts and maps were beginning to assume new importance in those days of geographical discovery. The value attached to them may be judged from the statement that Vespucius paid 130 ducats for one map. This sum would be more than $500 of our time. Columbus did not give up his maritime enterprises. He made voyages to the coast of Guinea and in other directions. It is said that he was in command of one of the vessels of his relative, El Mozo, when in the Portuguese seas. This admiral, with his squadron, engaged 4 Venetian galleys returning from Flanders. A bloody battle followed. The ship which Christopher Columbus commanded was engaged with a Venetian vessel, to which it set fire. There was danger of an explosion, and Columbus himself, seeing this danger, flung himself into the sea, seized a floating oar, and thus gained the shore. He was not far from Lisbon, and from this time made Lisbon his home for many years. Asterisk. The critics challenge these dates. But there seems to be good foundation for the story. It seems clear that, from the time when he arrived in Lisbon, for more than 20 years, he was at work trying to interest people in his great design of Western discovery. He says himself, "I was constantly corresponding with learned men, some ecclesiastics and some laymen, some Latin and some Greek, some Jews and some Moors." The astronomer Toscanelli was one of these correspondents. We must not suppose that the idea of the roundness of the earth was invented by Columbus, although there were other theories about its shape. Many intelligent men well understood that the earth was a globe, and that the Indies, though they were always reached from Europe by going to the east, must be on the west of Europe also. There is a very funny story in the Travels of Mandeville, in which a traveler is represented as having gone, mostly on foot, through all the countries of Asia, but finally determines to return to Norway, his home. In his farthest eastern investigation, he hears some people calling their cattle by a peculiar cry, which he had never heard before. After he returned home, it was necessary for him to take a day's journey westward, to look after some cattle he had lost. Finding these cattle, he also heard the same cry of people calling cattle, which he had heard in the extreme east, and now learned, for the first time, that he had gone round the world on foot, to turn and come back by the same route, when he was only a day's journey from home. Columbus was acquainted with such stories as this, and also had the astronomical knowledge which almost made him know that the world was round, and, like a ball, goes spinning in the air. The difficulty was to persuade other people that, because of this roundness, it would be possible to attain Asia by sailing to the west. Now all the geographers of repute supposed that there was not nearly so large a distance as there proved to be, in truth, between Europe and Asia. Thus, in the Geography of Ptolemy, which was the standard book at that time, 135 degrees, a little more than 1/3 of the Earth's circumference, is given to the space between the extreme eastern part of the Indies and the Canary Islands. In fact, as we now know, the distance is 180 degrees, half the world's circumference. Had Columbus believed there was any such immense distance, he would never have undertaken his voyage. Almost all the detailed knowledge of the Indies which the people of his time had was given by the explorations of Marco Polo, a Venetian traveler of the 13th century, whose book had long been in the possession of European readers. It is a very entertaining book now, and may well be recommended to young people who like stories of adventure. Marco Polo had visited the court of the great Khan of Tartary at Peking, the prince who brought the Chinese Empire into very much the condition in which it now is. He had also given accounts of Japan or Cipango, which he had himself never visited. Columbus knew, therefore, that, well east of the Indies, was the island of Cipango, and he aimed at that island, because he supposed that that was the nearest point to Europe, as in fact it is. And when finally he arrived at Cuba, as the reader will see, he thought he was in Japan. Columbus's father-in-law had himself been the Portuguese governor of the island of Porto Santo, where he had founded a colony. He, therefore, was interested in Western explorations, and probably from him Columbus collected some of the statements which are known to have influenced him with regard to floating matters from the West, which are constantly borne upon that island by the great currents of the sea. The historians are fond of bringing together all the intimations which are given in the Greek and Latin classics, and in later authors, with regard to a land beyond Asia. Perhaps the most famous of them is that of Seneca. In the later years there shall come days in which ocean shall loose his chains, and a great land shall appear, and Thule shall not be the last of the worlds. In a letter which Toscanelli wrote to Columbus in 1474, he enclosed a copy of a letter which he had already sent to an officer of Alfonso V, the King of Portugal. In writing to Columbus, he says, "I see that you have a great and noble desire to go into that country of the East, where the spices come from, and in reply to your letter I send you a copy of that which I addressed some years ago to my attached friend in the service of the most serene King of Portugal. He had an order from His Highness to write me on this subject.